Hey everybody, Shawn and Michelle with Heroics with another episode of Morning Coffee with Shawn and Michelle. We're glad that you could tune in this morning. We appreciate all the listeners from our first podcast episode. Thank you so much for the good feedback, for all the parts you enjoyed, and your suggestions for this episode. This morning, we went to a local coffee shop here in Frisco, where we live, called Renew Coffee. It's delicious. And I'll just kind of ask like last week, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a chai tea latte iced with 2%. I normally do soy milk, but they didn't have soy, so we made it work.
There we go.
Delicious.
It looks good. I've got myself an iced latte as well with oat milk for that little extra protein. And I also put a caramel and lavender syrup in here. So it's kind of got a little bit of that toastiness and sweetness, but it's also got this kind of cooling lavender flavor to it. I love lavender syrup. Like anywhere they have it, I'm just like, yes, please. Just put all of it in here. It's a good vibe. I highly recommend it. Yeah. Highly recommend lavender syrup, but more importantly, Renew Coffee here in Frisco. They don't sponsor us, but if you want to,
oh my gosh,
let us know. That'd be great. We'd be happy to work with you. On last episode, we talked a little bit about like who we are, where we came from, not the whole story, just kind of introduced ourselves as you do on an episode 1. And we also talked a little bit about like yoga, living yoga off the mat, and what that means. That doesn't mean do yoga in the middle of your office. I mean, if you want to, you can do that too.
I do know desk yoga stretches if anybody needs any.
There you go. So there's ways to do it. But what the philosophy of living yoga off the mat means, the roots of life coaching from positive and humanistic psychology, and how that is kind of like, you know, if Sigmund Freud sort of started psychology and then it went to clinical route, how coaching came off as like a sibling to that clinical psychology. So kind of helping people go from either bad to good or good to better by looking at people who are kind of living their best lives, as we say today, and how do we kind of help other people learn to do that too. We have a guest today.
Another guest.
Lily, our Boston
little baby
Terrier.
Girl.
Do you have anything you would like to say this morning? You want an introduction or?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's the question that's burning in everyone's minds too, is, you know, like how and why life coaching, you know, like how did you decide to create the Heroics brand, and like, you know, what is it to you? That's a lot of questions. We'll break it down.
No, I love that. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Good questions. Good questions.
Awesome.
So how I got into life coaching was a journey. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in a big family of 5, and I'm the oldest of 3 brothers. And I had a mom and a dad, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And when I was a little kid, for the most part, life felt pretty good. Family was doing pretty well, things like that. There was stuff going on, and I'll maybe talk about that some other time, but it was overall pretty good. But as I got into my middle school years, I kind of started to kind of like struggle a little bit with like low self-esteem, feelings of depression. Didn't realize I'd had like social anxiety for a long time, even though I was like actually weirdly popular in like elementary school. I was also a very shy kid at the same time. And that never really got figured out or addressed for several years. I didn't really address that. I didn't know how to.
Yeah.
I grew up in a family too where I was very curious about why do people behave the way that they do? Why do people act the way they do, think the way they think?
Sure.
All of that kind of stuff was really interesting to me, even as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, it was always interesting to me. And then I finally realized that psychology was the study of that very thing.
Right.
You know, motivation and beliefs and feelings and actions, personality, all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I started studying psychology probably towards the end of high school, outside of school. It's funny, I wasn't doing my homework, but I was studying psychology on Wikipedia.
That's awesome.
You know, in the afternoon or whatever. And also studying philosophy, because I was really big into philosophy, religion, things like that too, which I can talk about at another time. But that was a big part for me, was studying psychology. I was going to go to college. I started about a semester or two in, and then my parents announced that they were getting a divorce, which really rattled me. I didn't really see it coming. It was kind of a shock to me. And the main reason I was going to college at that time was mainly to please my parents. I actually didn't have much of an interest in going at that time. I was playing in a rock and roll band. I was smoking some weed. I was just being a little bit of an average teenager.
Living life,
doing my thing. I didn't really care about college at that time. So once they kind of decided to, have a divorce, I was like, well, I was really doing this to please you. And I kind of was angry about it. So I just stopped going because I was like, I was doing this for you. And now I'm angry with you guys. How I was feeling about it. So looking back now, I don't feel the same way. But at that time, that's how I felt. So kind of had my lost years, so to say. And then kind of started finding my way back. I was going to school for graphic design, kind of figuring something out. And then my dad suddenly passed away from a motorcycle accident, actually caused by somebody else. And that was a huge moment for me. I was relying on him still as an income provider. I was like 18 or 19, or no, I think I just hit like 20 or 21, but 21. I was living with him after my parents separated. And, now the reality sunk in that like, I've got nobody but me, So again, I had to drop out of college and go into the workforce. And was grateful that your dad was able to provide me a job at his company. So, did that, started making some money. We got married, moved into an apartment, paid some bills. I was able to kind of keep afloat. I got injured at this job. It was a manual labor job, and I got injured.
You had to have surgery.
I had to have surgery. Came back, and kind of realized, hey, this has been nice, but I'd kind of like to switch into something different. So you began working at I guess we could say, it's not like it's a secret. You were working at Fossil. I was like, can I say the name of the company? HR background. I was like, confidentiality.
It's fine. I mean, honestly, who hasn't worked at Fossil?
For real. I feel like everyone's had like a stint there.
But that's their first corporate.
So you were working there. I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So I started as a seasonal employee, did take a risk. I went for a seasonal job and, from my full-time job, and was like feeling guaranteed, like I'll be able to stay on because there was that opportunity. But unfortunately, there was a lot of unprocessed emotions from my parents' divorce and my dad's death that were really impacting me. And unfortunately, even though I was getting great ratings in my job, it was affecting my attendance. I was dealing with major panic attacks and like just depression. And before mental health days were really a known thing, I was using those, and maybe more than even the average person at that time. It impacted me, and I wasn't able to stay on after the season. So found another job. Got into telemarketing. I don't know. Somehow it clicked. So I got there, did that, did the whole shebang. Learned some things there. But again, that's where it really stuck to me, where I was like, oh my God, I've not been thrilled about really the last 3 of my jobs. I'd really like to find something I'm happy about. That's why I decided to go back to college. And it was kind of a risk. I went back full time. And that meant a reduction in income. And did mean that for a while, you were our main income provider. With the intention of getting through the program twice as fast as going half time, so that I could get back in the workforce and, end up like net positive, And it worked out, really. I got my psychology degree. I studied everything I was interested in. I studied, behavioral psychology. I studied positive psychology, a class that I loved. Health psychology.
Still have the books right here.
That's right. Maybe one day we'll bring out the textbooks. But I studied health psychology. I took counseling programs to teach how to do counseling, how to do group counseling, all sorts of stuff, research, the history of psychology, personality, child development, all the way up to adulthood. Because, after you hit 21, you don't just stop growing. Like, there's still developmental stages after all that. Huge foundations for everything that I learned. Great stuff. But that was also during COVID.
Yeah.
And I still hadn't quite addressed everything that was going on from my past.
Right.
I graduated and got into HR, mainly for money, right?
Yeah. Gotta pay bills.
Let's be honest. And that's why I got in it.
Yeah.
Was pretty good. But there was still just stuff I hadn't fully figured out. So I did go to therapy myself. I went for depression. I went for anxiety. I went for grief. And honestly, one or two counselors that I saw even said that I might have been experiencing post-traumatic stress from some of the different things I experienced in my life, which clicked, honestly. It was, I kind of fit the bill. So it was a lot of work. This is all part of how I got into coaching. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, so, I think that's the thing, right? Is you have to explain your story, your hero's journey.
It's a journey. It is a journey.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I did the work on myself. I began to learn about everything from my triggers to processing my own grief and, healing from some childhood events and my own limiting beliefs and things like that. The psychology field ended up becoming a huge way of helping me in a lot of that kind of stuff. Sure. It made me, helped me get a lot of progress. Yeah. It didn't do everything.
Sure.
But it helped me a lot.
Right.
And so I kind of took it upon myself around 2020, what is it now? 2025. So about 2022 or something like that. It was like, man, like life's short.
Yeah.
It's rough out here. Mm-hmm. I want to live my best life.
Yeah.
I want to be happy, and not everything worked out the way I wanted it to. Well, I can't change that.
Right.
But maybe I can try to do the best I can do now.
Yeah. So overcome and improvise.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So I went deep into it. I studied everything I could find. And then that helped me also explore other fields that were helpful for me, such as neuroscience.
Yeah.
I was learning a lot about different things like, I'd studied it in my programs, but like serotonin and dopamine and, oxytocin, the different chemicals, and learning through that, how even bottom up things like yoga or weightlifting or cardio, or even just sitting outside and exposing yourself to sunlight, can actually have a huge impact on these things. How much water you drink, what kind of foods you eat. If you're eating greasy foods that are inflaming your body, depression actually looks like inflammation in the brain. So if you're eating a bunch of fried foods, which when you're depressed, all you want is a cheeseburger and French fries. But that actually can make it worse because it actually increases the inflammation in your body and can exacerbate those symptoms of depression. I learned that. So I was like, okay, I'll still have my cheeseburgers every once in a while. I haven't cut them cold turkey, but I've reduced my diet, kind of circling back to your interest in diet. For a long time, I was a stubborn person about diet. And I was like, nah, whatever.
To like sneak in the veggies.
Seriously.
Like puree. Puree some carrots in the mac and cheese.
Yes, no, for real. It was, I never knew she was secretly giving me nutrition. I was like, I don't want nutrition. I just want
the spinach.
I want steaks and cheeseburgers. And, my waistline eventually started to show it. And my mind and my mindset and everything was affected by it too. So, and that's something that I've learned too, is holistically, you have to approach it that way. And I feel like holistic can kind of get taken in a few different ways.
Sure.
I mean it as in the whole person.
Right.
The brain is huge. Psychology is huge. This is the operating system of this is the engine. This is whatever, this is majorly important, but you're more than a brain. You're a body too. And honestly, there's even now studies about microbiome, your gut, your second brain. Yep. In fact, most of the serotonin in your body isn't in your brain. It's in your stomach. Points. I think what I learned is that there's so much more than just psychology.
Yeah.
It's a whole approach.
Yeah.
It's the whole mind body approach. And once I started to do that, it changed everything for me. Like I was able to kind of like start taking better care of my diet. I started to exercise more. It increased my self-esteem, my confidence, everything. And as I worked through that grief and that trauma, I was dealing with that as much as I used to. And then like by improving my like physical health, it helped to support everything too.
Right.
So I was really kind of going in a good way. Everything was going in a positive direction. But then I unfortunately was having a lot of challenges at a very difficult job. I was working in a company that was laying people off like every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I was the HR guy processing the paperwork every 3 months. And more people on my team were getting cut and my workload was getting bigger and my pay wasn't going up. And things just weren't looking really positive. I was working myself to death trying to like stay not getting fired or laid off. And also, honestly, after 2.5 years there, whether it was a good decision or not, I felt like it was time for me to fight for myself and say, I need a pay raise. Like I need it. If you guys keep I'm doing the work of 4 people now and I'm burning out, like at least give me some more compensation. Right. So it got to a point where I was able to argue for it. I got it. And then a month later, I was laid off. So I was laid off from that position. Kind of going a little bit back in time, how I kind of got into life coaching was while I was working at that company, I was very interested in the idea of like, what if I could run my own company? Because I was working for some dum-dums. I really was.
Yeah.
And I was kind of feeling some type of way about having people make career decisions for me, whether I got a raise, whether I got a promotion. Right. When I see, certain politically motivated promotions happening and I'm not experiencing that too.
Right. You were doing the hard work, but somebody else for being buddies with somebody was getting that promotion.
Yep. Essentially. And it works the same way in HR, at least at some companies. Not every company, but the company I was at. Yeah. I wanted to have more control over my career, more control over my earnings, more control over my destiny, really. I was feeling like I was surrendering so much of my life to these individuals at this company that might not even know who I am, Right. I was having a night where I couldn't sleep. And I got to a point where, for some reason that night, I just woke up and I pulled out my laptop and I started a website on Google Sites. And was just like, what if I could start my own business? What would that look like? Right. And
what kind of business?
Yeah. And I don't know. It was just a way to brainstorm or get something off my mind. And so I kind of started writing a bullet list. It was like coaching and yoga and aromatherapy and selling incense and I don't know, just random stuff. I was like, this would be kind of cool. Yeah. It made me feel good. It kind of was like something. I was like, cool. That makes me feel happy. And I went back to sleep.
Sure.
A few months later, I got laid off.
Yeah.
And I remembered that. And as you mentioned earlier, I remembered how when we first got married, we talked about opening a wellness center. Yeah. And I was like, that's always kind of still been there.
Right.
Like that never really left me either. It was a latent thing as the day to day kind of took over. Yeah. All that stuff kind of just
fell on the wayside.
Went in the background, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, but I don't want it to anymore.
Yeah.
I've been, in a way, I felt like I'm following the rules that everybody else is telling me to follow, and it's not working for me. Sure.
Maybe when you say rules to follow, what do you mean by that?
I feel like the rules of get a safe job, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. I don't know. I went to college, and I'm glad I did.
Sure.
I got the safe job,
right?
But I wasn't happy with it.
Sure.
And sure, maybe it was the company, maybe it was the field.
Okay.
I've explored around this and that.
Yeah.
But it felt like I was living everybody else's version of what they think my life should be.
Sure.
you know?
That makes sense.
And not what I think my version of my life should be. And I'm the guy who's got to live in my skin
yeah, exactly.
24 hours a day. I'm the one feeling my feelings and thinking my thoughts and feeling the strain on my body or the feelings of positivity when something good is going on. And I was like, you know what, man, like you said, life is short. I got one life.
Well, and I think to your credit too, I think a lot of people can relate to feeling as though, well-meaning, I'm sure, giving people a benefit of the doubt when they want to say, oh, you should get into this field, or you should do this, or you should do that. And sometimes you just feel, like you said, maybe through your life experiences, almost jaded, right? Because maybe, like you said, the crises that pop up, the traumatic experiences, sometimes you just kind of go numb and you're just like, okay.
Which is a symptom of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
And it genuinely is.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is I think it's almost like you can't see the forest. You just see the tree. And I think that's the thing, right? Is that, like you said, your dream, you know, it was always there. But I think because of all the voices of, oh, the American dream, as they say, you know? And so I think that's the thing a lot of people can relate to. And so what was it that, you know, helped that to not just be a distant dream? You know?
Honestly, getting laid off again.
Yeah. Walk us through that.
I know
we're as best as you can.
I know we're at an hour. There's probably some things we're going to cut.
We're going to cut.
So I'm happy to keep going.
Yeah. We'll keep going.
Cool. So lost my job. I was actually kind of relieved. It was a pressure off my plate. I got a nice severance package because I argued for it, which, just free advice, if you ever get laid off and they offer you a severance package, fight for more. Okay? I'm your HR guy. I'm your coach. Fight for more. The worst that can happen is they'll say no. The best that can happen is you can get more. So just do it. Just do it. Fight for more. Every HR person I've ever talked to tells people to fight for more at other companies, not at their company that they work for, but at other companies, their friends and family, they're like, fight for more. So do it. Fight for more. So I did, and I got more, and it was nice. And I was kind of working on the project. You know, we were kind of calling it Spray Wellness at the time.
But I think it's still cute.
Right. And eventually we got to Heroics, and I was really about to launch it. But I came into contact with somebody on LinkedIn who had an HR job at their company. Was like, that'd be kind of nice. You know, this is funny how these things work, right? A life journey, a hero's journey. Sometimes you take something and you think this is the right decision, but it's not always the right decision.
You took a wrong turn.
I took a wrong turn. I chased the shiny. I chased the paycheck. And, you know, maybe it worked out. I think it worked out, you know, despite the twists. But anyway, worked there for 3 months. They brought me on to be an HR guy and a process improvement coordinator, for lack of better terms. It was their first outside hire. They wanted a fresh set of eyes. They wanted somebody that was like SHRM certified, which I'm not, but I know everything about it. I could pass the test. I just never took it. I knew all the best practices. And 3 months in, after realizing what kind of shit show was going on at this company, and very respectfully at a meeting that was set up by my manager with the whole team, for me to politely present my ideas on, you know, here's my first 3 months and here's my thoughts on what we could improve. Here's what's working well. Here's what's not. Even doing a mock presentation with a coworker that was like, this is a great idea. I think you should present this tomorrow. I did that presentation, and then that coworker was like, I don't really see why we need to do this. And I was like, just yesterday you said this is a great idea. What the hell? You know, and then the manager who made that process that I suggested changing took it very personally and got very disrespectful with me in that meeting. And I had been learning about setting boundaries, and instead of taking it, you know, I was like, well, I hear what you're saying. I have a bit of a different opinion, but perhaps we could talk about that. You know, just a very polite rebuttal. I know I'm lesser in her eyes, you know, because I'm not a director, but I'm a human being and I have worth. So I think that cost me my job. I went to Disney World with Michelle. Had a great weekend.
Had an amazing vacation.
An amazing weekend. They said, enjoy yourself, have fun. And then that next day I clocked back in. They were like, it's not working out. And I was gone. So honestly, at that point, that's when I was like, it's time to pull the trigger. It's time to do this. And for me, why coaching Why didn't I go into therapy? Why didn't I become a therapist? Why didn't I become a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a social worker? You know, something like that, right? I think that's a fair question.
Right.
One, money.
Sure. Just like
resources.
Yeah.
It takes money to go to college. I could take a loan out, sure. But you know, that's one thing I just thought about. It was like that. Then time.
Yeah.
You know, even if I go full time again, a master's program could take 2+ years.
Right.
Then there's the interning afterwards. There's everything else that goes on with that.
Right.
It was a long time.
Right.
3, as much as I really, really respect the field of psychology, I believe that there is a little bit more to wellness than just psychology. So I think while some people can really benefit for seeing a psychotherapist or a counselor, psychologist, because they really need to drill down into that very specific world, it's huge, it's important. I like to take on a little bit more of that holistic approach. The things that helped me, the psychology plus the physiology, the nutrition, the everything else that's helped me improve my life overall. From the top down and the bottom up, a la the sandwich method. The heroic sandwich. So,
we love it.
Yeah. So I realized coaching for me was a way to combine my corporate background, because there is training that I've done. There's all of that. And that's part of coaching, was coaching your employees, coaching your team, coaching managers in training or executives in training. That's actually one element of where coaching comes from. And psychology, everything that I'm interested in, everything I'm passionate about. And honestly, it felt like it combined my strengths in a way that nothing else could. Like psychology therapy could get close, but not quite hit every single mark. Corporate world got some things right, but not everything. For me, running our own coaching practice combines everything that I feel like I'm passionate about, everything I'm good at, everything I care about, and everything that helped me in my own personal life, you know, into one package. It's the whole thing. It's the whole enchilada. It's that's how I got into it. You know, I discovered it was a route. I took a certification course over the summer. I believe it was that first time I was laid off. And became certified as a holistic wellness coach. Which was a really exciting program. And I think very telling that for the 3 years I was in HR, I never took my SHRM certification, but in a matter of like a month and a half, I was already certified. And as a life coach,
let's go.
I think I found my path. You know, so I was immediately on it. And I think that's kind of the short version of the story of how I got into coaching, was combining everything that helped me, all my strengths, all my passions, all my experience in such a way that I found something that fits me like a glove.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree. I think like you said, you know, just tying into the whole heroics, you know, brand and start, I think, you know, you and I both had certain life experiences, but we also have our passions, our interests, our natural talents and aptitudes in finding ways, like you said, to really mix it in the best way possible. Like you said, your own life experiences, your own hurdles and obstacles that you've had to overcome in your own hero's journey. And, you know, coupled with the experiences in the workplace, right? And so you can really speak to that. But like you said, I loved it when you said, you know, I'd been in HR for however many years. And, you know, as soon as I got laid off, you know, I hadn't taken my SHRM certification for HR, but as soon as I got laid off, in a month, got my life coaching certification. And I think that's just telling, like you said, just how much more on fire you are for this, you know, like, and I can see the difference, you know, and it warms my heart, because I do remember, you know, I've been with you through a lot of that journey. And so I've seen,
yes, you have.
So I've seen those days when you would get off work, you know, at some of those other jobs. And now I see so much life in you again. And it's so great knowing that, you know I have such a great husband. And it's just great knowing that I'm not the only person now that will benefit from his big heart for others. And I think it's just so great because, like you said, it really does bring in all of your natural talents and interests in a way that really feels natural for you to be able to help others.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's really exciting to see how it's helping my clients too.
Yeah.
I was very confident that it would.
Yeah.
But, there's always that little doubt. Like, is it really? Is it really? Once I got my first couple of clients and I started to see how in just a couple of weeks, things that they'd been stuck in for years were starting to improve.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I thought this would work. I was, I was pretty sure.
You were like, I'm pretty sure I can do this.
Yeah, like I think I can do this.
But now you're like, I got this.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is for real. Like I knew it was, but until you really see it. But it's just very reaffirming for me to see how people have been able to grow in their self-esteem and their confidence and their motivation, how they're starting to either lose weight or they are going after a job opportunity. I don't know, so many different things that where they like hadn't been able to do it before.
Right.
The sleeping better at night, which is literally from the practical element of improving their sleep schedule to just I'm enjoying my life better, and they're sleeping better at night, It's seeing how all that is happening in my clients' lives, knowing that it happened in my life was really helpful. And I think one element about coaching that I really appreciate that I try to tie into the way I approach coaching is I learned a lot in therapy, but I also learned a lot outside of therapy too. That might have helped kind of process some things, but I was doing a lot of my own homework outside. I was doing some of my own things. This sounds kind of maybe a little out there, but to help process some grief with my dad, I set up a photo and I sat in a chair across from him and I just kind of said everything I wished that I could say. And it was hard and it was emotional, but it felt like a release. And that was something I just kind of came up with on my own. That was a huge help for me in processing my grief. And so it's kind of the work you do outside too, right? And even a good therapist will tell you that. It's not just what happens in the session, it's what you do outside. But in coaching, that's something I really help motivate and reinforce in my clients is that here what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your experiences. We're going to explore that. I'm going to be here to be kind of your support, help you through that. Also reassess things, reframe things, challenge a little bit. And then really it comes down to the doing part. That is so important. You have to do something with what you are learning. Accountability is really big. And some therapists are great about there's my text. Some of them are real good about.
We're natives, can you tell?
Right? Yeah, it comes out sometimes. Some therapists are really good about keeping their clients accountable. And some aren't. Let's just be honest. There's a bell curve in every profession: therapy, nutrition, yoga. Not all are created equal. Some are better than others. Let's just get that out of the way right now. Right. And I've had experiences where I've had some that were a little better at keeping me accountable, and others that would just kind of affirm everything I would say. And
there wasn't as much growth.
It was just a lot of like, you're so right, they're there, you're so right,
which is good at times, but when that's all you're getting, you're like, okay, well, what now, like what more, like
and I don't really come out and tell my clients you're wrong, but because honestly,
not be a good coach.
Because honestly, I don't think I'm qualified enough to really tell you that, because I really do believe that clients really know their lives way better than me, know what they want and all of that. So when I keep people accountable, for me, I've been in situations where people tried to, be accountable to, or I was trying to be accountable to them. And it was a very shame-based type of accountability. It didn't work. In fact, it kind of made it worse. For me, how I keep my clients accountable is like, I just check in with them every once in a while, like maybe once or twice between sessions, and then at the follow-up. And I just see, how's it going? I want them to know I'm still with them. It's really a form of support.
Right.
And if they do it, I'm like, heck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And if not, it's like, instead of going, well, you said you were going to do this and you're not doing it. So like, let's go. Like, let's go. It's not like that for me. It's more like, okay, what's getting in the way? Like you said, because now that's what we got to focus on.
Right.
It's not, oh, okay, well, sounds like you're struggling. Well, get on it. It's like, okay, maybe there's more to this than we realized at first.
In the first session. Yeah. Like maybe there's an underlying thing that, you didn't discuss, you weren't even aware of, but now that some time has passed.
Yep. Now we got to go just a little deeper and figure out what's that thing and how do we challenge that so that the next week they are making progress. Or if again we run into another roadblock, it's again just kind of diagnosing.
Yeah, piece by piece. How are we going to get through it?
Yep, that's really it. And so my clients have told me they really like that processing side of coaching, the psychology side, but also the action and the accountability. For them, they feel like that's helping them accelerate their growth than in any other venue that they've been in. It's that I have someone to be accountable to. He's not going to be mean about it, but he's there to help, encourage me when I do well and help me out when I'm struggling. And like going, okay, we talked about it and we distill it down to one action step. That's where the change really happens. That's where the neuroplasticity starts to kick in, where the rewiring begins to happen, where the rubber meets the road, where the limiting beliefs become less obvious, less in your face and start to disappear because you're seeing for yourself that they were always an illusion.
Yeah. And I think something too that you touched on, about, affirming, right? Because I know that like you mentioned in our last podcast, sometimes you have sessions where that is all you do, because sometimes that's what we need, right? Sometimes we're not in a place where we're ready yet to diagnose and dig deep.
Right.
But, I think, and I had that train of thought and it just left me. No. It was something about the way you approach accountability. And, that's what I was going to say. I think, sometimes I feel like, just from conversations I've heard from others and even some of my own experiences too, sometimes when you do get just the affirmation and not any of the like homework, so to say, right? Sometimes you're like, okay, I've talked about it. I don't know what to do with it now. And then, or it's just kind of like, okay, I'm feeling this type of way about this, but I don't want to feel this way anymore.
Yes.
What do I do? And so I think that's the thing that's great is, I feel like sometimes we really like, I'll just throw an example out, right? Like, I have some things from childhood that, I've had to work really hard on to heal from, that for one reason or another were frustrating or triggering or what have you. And, for a long time talking about it. And I would just get angry. And I just
kind of just reactivate is what that's called.
And I call it the rage stage because I feel like that's all that was happening was I was just mad because I was
get stuck there.
Yes. And then, and that's also another reason why I got back into yoga because I was like, I got to do something with this.
Exactly. Like, you have to do something.
Like nobody was really like telling me, like I got a little bit of it, but it was more just like, I'm angry. I need to go, I need to go run or I need to go do some hot yoga, vinyasa, ashtanga flows, something. I gotta release this. And I think that's the thing is, sometimes like you said, with coaching, it's kind of like you're helping give both. You're helping to, here's the affirmation because we need it, right? We need to be told and reaffirmed like, yeah, that
sucks.
That sucks. Like you didn't deserve it, or what have you, or that was shitty that they did that, But I think it's like, okay, yes, we're processing, we're moving through it, but at the same time, okay, here's what we're going to do about it so that we're not just staying stuck there. Instead of just reliving this event and instead of just staying in this angry stage, it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do so that like we are addressing it, but we're not staying focused on that part of your past. We're going to focus more on where do you want to go? Where is that place off in the horizon that you're trying to get to?
Yeah.
How do we get you there?
Yes.
And I think that's what's great about your approach is you know, I feel like a lot of us, you know, have struggled to figure it out on our own, right? Like, what do I do? I know where I am. I know where I want to be, but how do I get there? And I think that's what's great about your approach to coaching is, you know, you are taking what your clients are their goals, their hopes, their dreams, what they're trying to achieve. And you're like, okay, yeah, let's get to there.
Yes.
Like, how do we get to there?
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean.
What was I going to say? Was it?
I don't know, but your thinking face is cute.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think what I was going to say, right, is sometimes talking about it's helpful. Sometimes it's not. I know that sounds funny, but sometimes it's actually not. Sometimes whenever you vent, all it does is just bring it back up again. And there is some science to show that too. Yes, you do have to talk about some things to process it.
Sure.
But if you go too fast, if you go too deep,
if
you go too often, that can all be problematic. You know, it really is. And sometimes you have to focus on the grounding, the resourcing, as it's called sometimes, and really just like doing things. Because I think what I've kind of learned, give or take, is that what's happened in the past happens in the past. It affects us in the present, right? It's the present that we are experiencing at all times.
Right.
We are always experiencing the present. Even if we're thinking about the past, we're doing it in the present.
We're not actually in the past.
Right. We're not even actually time traveling, right? We're really here, right? Even if, you know, they call it flashbacks, it's a real thing that people can have with traumas. It's like they kind of forget, right? But even in that moment, they're in the present. And that's where it all boils back down to, is the present moment, the mindfulness, the resources, the grounding, the activity, the things that are supplying you at this very moment with what you need, because we cannot change the past. It is immutable, for a lack of better words. But we can retrain how we see it, how we process it, how we overcome it, and also in our present day, how we relate to it, so that we can be more empowered, more confident, more inspired, and start to not have that stuff impact us in the same way that it used to. It's really kind of amazing. I will say this, and it's still somewhat controversial, but I don't really care. It's the research is starting to show this is more and more true, is that, you know, when it comes to things like depression, anxiety, trauma, etc., for a therapist to diagnose you with that, or really a psychologist, you have to meet a certain level of criteria. You can, through life change and through mindset change, begin to untick those boxes to the point that you no longer meet the criteria for the diagnosis. Sometimes they call that remission. So like if you were in the depression moment, you know, and you check the boxes, but now you're eating healthy, you're doing this, your mindset's changed, your motivation's up, blah, blah, blah. You no longer meet the criteria. You effectively are not experiencing, do not have, if you will, depression. Now, someone might experience it again later. It can sometimes come back, right? I'm not saying that it will be gone forever. That's not what I'm saying. But through lifestyle change, mindset change, things like that, you build up your resilience, your immunity, so to say, to it, so that you can be more prepared, so that should it come back, maybe if it was a 10 out of 10 kind of depression that you were experiencing before, maybe now it's more of a 7 or a 6 or a 5, or if it lasted you a few months, maybe now it's only a couple of weeks, and then maybe it's only a week or a day or two. And you get to that point where it's like, you know, it's almost like taking your vitamins. Right?
I mean, I think that's the thing, you know, I'll speak for myself too. Like you said, you know, I mean, I have been diagnosed with OCD, with OCD, anxiety, depression, CPTSD, and I can say confidently that, you know, I think it was 2019, my OCD was at its worst. I mean, it was, and that's the thing, people don't realize what OCD really is. You know, people see this like example of it on TV, and they see, oh, it's somebody who's just compulsively clean. Well, okay, there's different kinds of OCD. Mine was mental, and it was anxiety times 10,000.
Yeah.
So imagine your most intense anxiety moment, but like times 10,000 every single moment of the day. And you just can't feel peace. And, you know, through so much healing, through yoga, through therapy, through psychiatry, right? Like Shawn said, making those changes, reframing, you know, cognitive changes, audible changes, like, oh my gosh, I am way more at peace. Like it's very seldom where I have a little moment of that OCD kind of creeping back up. I would say it's like few and far between.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would, if I met you today, if you told me that you had that diagnosis, I wouldn't know.
Right.
Like I wouldn't have guessed it. I would just say maybe she's just a little particular about some things sometimes, but not any more unusually than some people are, or most people are about things. We've all got things we're particular about, you know. I'm the same way. Like I don't know. I have examples of that too, right? I wouldn't have ever pegged you as that.
And I think that's the thing. It's just like Shawn said, you know, I think sometimes when, you know, for those of you out there who have been diagnosed with, you know, OCD or depression, you know, or PTSD or PTSD, you know, you're not your diagnoses.
Yeah.
And I know that was something I struggled with.
And it's not permanent either.
No. And I think that's the thing. I also, you know, was really thankful that Shawn kept reminding me is like, okay, but it's not permanent.
Yeah.
You know, like you can do things to heal from it and overcome it. And so, you know, I will be the first to just be vulnerable enough to say that, like, yeah, I did. I struggled with OCD so bad, but now I don't. And it's just like Shawn said, it was the yoga, it was the therapy, it was the you know, the reframing, the literally teaching myself, like reframing those thoughts and using logic to be like, okay, it's fine. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the thing is like there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
There totally is. But now I feel like I have better resources to kind of be my safety net whenever I feel that way. I've built up that internal resilience, that immunity, so to say. And I'm a little bit better at diagnosing where it's coming from and what I can do about it. Again, you got to do something about it. Yeah. And sometimes that's practical. Sometimes like, oh, I'm stressed about finances. Okay, let's do something about the finances.
Yeah, let's budget. Let's cut something.
Right. It's sometimes like that's it. Or sometimes it's like, I'm feeling kind of bummed. I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to listen to some music and chill out. Or I'm feeling kind of stressed out. I'm just going to make myself a nice hot bath, you know, with some like bath salts in it and light a candle. I'm just going to chill out.
Right.
And now it's like, that's the thing I did about it. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the importance is that, you know, sure, it still comes and goes, but it is in a far away better place.
Yeah.
Through internal work, and doing things, right? My brain has been rewired over time through the act of neuroplasticity.
Right.
And that's part of the coaching too, is helping people rewire their brains. It's not like I'm like literally over there, like, you know, but that's what's happening.
Right.
And that's why sometimes change is hard at first because
you're having to like rebuild.
Yeah. The paths we usually take in our brains, we're having to learn how to build new paths, kind of going back, cutting away some of the hedges or the brush and finding that. It's harder to do that than just to take the trail that's already there.
Right.
But you know where that trail goes now. You don't want to take that trail. You need a new trail.
Right.
You have to make
You have to carve your own path.
You have to make the trail. And it's hard at first, but it's so worth it. And eventually once that path's made, you've got a new path. And guess what? That old path
is going to starts
growing over again. Right. So like that's literally the neurology, the neuroscience of change, you know? Which is so huge and so cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's how I got into life coaching. That's it.
I think it's great because like the psychology influences the nutrition, and the nutrition influences the psychology, right?
Yep, and exercise or what have you, right?
Yeah.
So it's all of that really ties together, and that's my story, I guess, if I could like put it in a nutshell, which I know we like we're revisiting it from a while ago.
No,
but it was truly a hero's journey for me. And that's why I named it that, because it wasn't easy.
No.
I experienced death, divorce, and I forgot to even mention that the home I grew up in was foreclosed on as a result of my dad's passing. My family was evicted from their home. I was part of my journey too. All these challenges that I dealt with could have brought me to my knees, and at times it did.
Right.
There were times when I was
so.
in the dark, and I was in very low places. Even thinking about it now, I can think, and it brings a little tears to my eyes out of empathy.
Yeah.
Because man, I suffered. But and I would often ask, why me? Why me? Why me? I don't have an answer to this day. I think it's just luck of the draw, so to say. But that's how it works. I don't think I used to think, does God not like me or something? It has nothing to do with that. It's just more like, it's just kind of how it works. We don't choose our circumstances, but we choose how to handle our circumstances. When we focus on what's within our control, we can find our ways through almost anything. And tying into a book that I've read called Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, that's something he stressed too. He was a psychologist who was captured by the Nazis during World War II and spent time in a concentration camp. And he, outlines his experiences to great detail. And then he kind of developed a theory while he was in there. And he noticed that those who had something to hold on to, if you will, tended to survive the hardships better than those who lost hope and who focused on the outside. It created, when he was like, to sort of summarize, if you have a meaning or a purpose to it, even if it's one you created for yourself, it will give you the why to hold on to. It will give you, when you have a why, you can survive any how, is how it's sometimes said. Or any what,
my gosh.
And that's powerful, because there's far fewer experiences in life, if any, that can trump the hardship of what they experienced. And he got through it, and that was something he noticed was, so even though my circumstances weren't nearly as bad, knowing that I have probably gone through more than maybe the average person, I realized I needed to do the same. And the hero's journey for me was that, because there was so much overlap. Every hero you've ever read about goes through shit, and then they get to that point where they can learn to overcome it. And so that was my odyssey of ups and downs and trials and challenges and hardships and suffering and lessons learned and mistakes made, and and then doing the work and finding the right support for myself until I was able to get to a place to help myself through it. And now I am so extremely grateful to have the opportunity to help people with things as heavy as trauma to just, I'm looking for a new job. And it's like, because I've been there too. You know what I mean? So I think that's the great thing, is that you don't have to be in a horrible place in life to see a life coach. Even if you're like, well, I kind of feel like my life is okay. It's not bad. Or I even feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. The whole premise of coaching is like,
live your best life.
Best life. It's like, it's called positive psychology, because it's not just about helping you go from bad to okay. It's going from that to good, or even better. That I believe fully that we all have some area of improvement, some area we can grow in, some element that we can heal in, or some goal that we can strive for. That's not to, undercut the value of appreciation for your life and gratitude and peace and acceptance. But I think we all could theoretically balance both that peace and gratitude and appreciation for where we are and how far we've come with, I could also potentially work on this little habit I've got that sometimes causes a little friction in my relationship, or I could maybe find a better job, or I could eat a little healthier, and literally coaching goes from the whole tweaks to the whole life transformation.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the thing too, is I think sometimes when people think life coaching, they assume like you said, it's got to be something big or deep or, heavy. And it could just be like, man, I got some people I work with that like, I don't know how to deal with, they're different personalities or they're getting on my nerves or whatever it is. Right. Yeah. Or maybe it's like, man, I love my family, but there's some instances where I don't know how to navigate this. And like, this is a reoccurring thing and I just need some help. Like, how do I set these boundaries? How do I protect my peace? You know, so things like that, might not seem like super deep, but they're still affecting you on the day to day.
Totally.
There's still instances where like, it's a frequency, it's a frequent enough of a pattern that you're just like, oh, like I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. Like, I want to find a way to still be happy and agreeable, but also like not get so worked up, you know? And I think that's the thing is like you said, it can be a wide range. It can be the finances. It can be, a job. It can be, the health goals. But I think that's the thing is, and life coaching can be a few sessions or it could be a reoccurring thing, right? It's not like you don't have to commit to like, oh, I'm going to have to commit to a few sessions. No, you can take however many you may or may not need. And, I think that's the great thing is that you're really able to help a whole wide range.
Yeah. Because the principles are wide and vary, but yet at the same time are universal. And they can help people, whether they're in the deepest pits of despair or they're already in a good place. And they're just looking how to make life 1% better.
Right.
1% better. Yeah. That's all, it works the same way. Yeah. It's really cool. It's like it's an applied study of psychology, but more than that, it's like motivation, human purpose, it's philosophy, it's science, it's all this stuff all wrapped into one thing that helps people just live their best life.
Best heroic life.
Exactly. So I guess that's where we'll end. It's been a pleasure getting to catch up as always.
For sure. And sharing our stories.
Yeah.
Hopefully they inspire you and either to try yoga or coaching or even just encouraging you to go after your own dreams.
Yes. Whether you're listening and your life is great or it is not going great at all.
We're here for you.
We understand. We've been there. We've felt it. We've experienced it. Yeah. We really are here for you. Yeah. Heroics is here to help you live your healthiest, happiest, most heroic life. So thanks for tuning in and listening today. Hope you enjoy. Like, comment, subscribe, share, get our podcast QR code tattooed on your arm.
Oh my gosh.
So that you can always come back to it.
Or just stickers. We might make stickers.
Maybe just stickers. Maybe that's a thought we could do too. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, y'all.